welcome to the next video on creating classes, Chapter 9, and maybe a little bit of Chapter 10 and Chapter 11 might be mixed in here. We'll see how it goes, but certainly Chapter 9. And so in Chapter 9 they talk about objects and classes, and let me give you a quick definition of an object. An object describes a certain entity in your program, kind of vague. But an entity is just a thing that your program is going to manipulate. Like if you're dealing with students in your program, you would create a object of type student. You'd say new student. And in doing so, what you've done is you've created an object that describes a particular student. Now you could have 100 students in your class. Each of those students would have their own unique variables and properties and attributes. And usually what you do is define methods that operate on those students. Like, what do students generally do? Well, theoretically they should study. So if you had a student called Tony, Tony equals new student, and of course once you create that student, Tony, you have to say something like Tony.study, and by virtue of you running that or executing that method on Tony, Tony will become smarter because there's probably going to be a little variable inside the object Tony that will indicate some level of brilliance that that student will attain by studying. So what we're going to try to do is finally summarize what Chapter 9 is all about. And what I'm going to do in this video, and probably a couple of other videos as well, it's going to be a multi-video type topic. We're going to create our own. I'm going to try to summarize what Chapter 9 is all about. And I'm going to call this, I'm going to create my own date class. Now I also use the word class. A class is not an object, okay? A class is used to create an object. You could think of the class as like the blueprint that the system uses to create objects. So once you have, once you create a date object, that we're going to create MyDate, I'm going to call it MyDate. Once you have a class called MyDate, that MyDate will be a cookie cutter to create future dates. This will make more sense as we go through the code. So what I did was I created a blank MyDate class, okay, and a driver that's going to use it just to save some time inside a project. Okay, so what first thing I would do in creating a class is figure out what does every date, what represents a date. Okay, what represents a date? Well, a date has basically a month, a day, and a year associated with it, right? Those are the three fields. Now, let's leave it at that. That's probably the simplest definition of what a date is. Now, you could probably embellish it by putting other fields in there, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I'm going to define a attribute or a property that has those fields there. They're all integers. They're all integers, right? They don't have to be on multiple lines, but I think it's just better to do it this way. All right, so there you go. There's our class. What I've defined are 3 attributes that are associated with dates. Now, what do I mean? As a matter of fact, this is all I need. Okay, we've defined the date associated with an object of MyDate. Okay, so we come over here to driver. It's perfectly okay for me to go ahead and say, let's see, MyDate X equals new MyDate. See, perfectly okay to do that. But now the problem is the fields that you've defined within that date month, day, year are all zeroed out. It's guaranteed that they'll be all zeroed out. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, x dot month is going to be equal to, I guess, 7 for July, the date that this video is being made. X dot day is equal to 12. And x dot, see, what's the dot notation refers to the attribute associated with this object. X is the object, and IntelliSense looks inside the class and sees that, hey, I got these fields that are available for me to manipulate. Okay, so let's manipulate them. Now there's other things in there, as you can see. Like if I hover over X, let me do that next one, 2020. X dot. Okay, there's other fields, or actually methods that you have available to you by virtue of creating an object, and those are called inheritance. See, the system would first look inside the class to see if there's anything that looks like one of those methods, but it doesn't find anything. So, see, apparently I have a method called toString. So, and you can see it's coming from some class called object here. Everything, well, there's a concept called inheritance that we'll get into in a future chapter. So just because we defined a MyDate, you also have the benefit of inheriting a bunch of standard operations that Java provides through the class called object. Enough said about that for now. Let's just concentrate on these fields. Okay, so, and likewise, we can create another date. MyDate y equals new date. And we'll do this. Let me just do a copy and paste for this guy right here. Copy, paste, and let me call this MyDate. The reason why I called it MyDate as opposed to date is that the JDK has a date class already. I don't want to get involved with any type of conflicts that might occur. So let's go ahead and just change those x's to y's. And so see, it's guaranteed. Now if I change this 7, 12, let's make this 11, 12, 1967. Okay, so that's another date. Guaranteed, these numbers will initialize the fields of y because you specified the y object. Okay, and so I can guarantee you that by saying, well, let's do a sys output. And we're going to output the, let's see, we'll output the month of each date because this is going to be a pain to output all the fields. Let's do output month. Okay, plus, let's put a little space here. We're going to output the month of those two objects, y.month, and let's see. If everything I say is correct, I'm going to output 7 for the first number and 11 for the second number, and because those are the fields that have been initialized with those property values. And did I run it? Yeah, I did. Come on, just a little slow. 7 and 11, right there. Okay, now, that's not it's a class, but it's not a very good class. There's inherently a lot of problems with this. What's to stop me from saying -7 here? Or negative 220? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay? It's possible for you to enter stupid data inside a field because the problem is the field itself is visible to the world. Okay? It's visible to the world because I didn't prevent that visibility from happening. So it's perfectly okay to put negative numbers in there, and that doesn't make any sense. What we're going to do is we're going to say, well, the first month is going to be given 1, and then the day is going to be a number between 1 and 30, 31, or 29, or 28, depending upon that. Day is going to be a little complicated depending upon the leap year, but the year certainly got to be positive. You can't have a negative number, right? So what we're going to do is prevent bad data from entering the object. So it's a very simple thing to do. Is that just make these attributes, these fields, the object's data private. Just make them all private. Okay? Something that's private cannot be accessed outside the class. We go to the driver and look at this. It says, listen, the visibility is private. I can't just willy-nilly put any value inside that month field or the day field or the year field. We can't do that. So how do we get those values in there? Well, here's what you're going to do next. Okay. See, if they're private, then the main program can't change the values. What you need to do is develop other methods, public methods, that control what goes into the class. And those methods are called setters. And here's what I'm going to talk about right here. I'm going to generate something called a getter and setter. And this is something that you need to do when you're creating your classes. Okay, and also you've got to use these same naming convention. Okay, let me see. Right now, let's see if we can figure out how we could have a value of -7 go into month. Here's what you're going to do. We're going to define a public method that's void. It doesn't return anything, but I'm going to call it set month. And that set month is going to take a parameter called month, M. Just call it M. And then what I'm going to do is say, well, month equals M. Okay? And that's called a setter because I'm actually changing the object's fields in some way. I'm taking a parameter and setting these fields, these properties, the data of the object to some value. It's called a mutator. You're mutating the object. So M gets assigned to month, and I know month, just by hovering over it, Eclipse tells you that you're referencing the field. So the way the variables are looked up, it asks, hey, do I have a local variable called month in my function? No. So it goes up and says, hey, do I have a field called month? Yep. There you go. Now, what does that buy us? Well, right now, what it buys us is this. Instead of saying .month, we have no access to the month. We can say x.setMonth, okay, pass it the number that we would like to set, and let's see. Oh, okay, we don't have any error here, but what about this -7? Well, according to the code, this -7 is still going into the object, so we need an if statement. Okay, we need an if statement. This statement can only be allowed if the value of M is greater than or equal to 1 and M is less than or equal to 12. If you could say that's true, it's perfectly okay to make that change. Now, we could leave it at that. We could leave it at that. Because if I entered 9 - 7, the object isn't going to change, but the problem is I have no indication that something bad happened. So what I'm going to do for now is I'll put a little message, okay, that will say, listen, month value bad or something. Month value bad, and you might as well print out the month. Okay, print out the month so we can do a little debugging for it. And this system, you're using system.out. There's also a system.error that prints out the error in red, but it works exactly the same. So what you need to do is go ahead and do the same thing for set day, set year. You're going to need to use the days, years, and months and stuff. But for let's show you a way to generate these getters and setters really fast. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to erase this. Erase it. I'm going to go to source. I'm going to say generate getters and setters, and select the fields that you would like to generate getters and setters for. Okay, let's generate them right there. Look at this. What it did was it generated the skeletons associated with the skeleton code for all the getters and setters that you're going to create in your code. Now, the getters are basically accessor functions. They just return the values here. Okay, so if you would like to print out the month, you can, okay, like we did in the main program, well, we need to do this, .get month to access that data. See, no error there. .get month for the Y. So go ahead there. We return the month for Y. No errors on that statement. We're going to fix that in a second. So, and also, I really like to put my getters together. I think there's an option that would have let us do that. I just didn't pick it. I want my getters together and my setters together. But right now, I'm just moving these around. It's organization, that's all. Okay, and I'm going to say that I'm going to call this section of code in my class getters and setters. Okay, they're accessors. Accessor functions return values from the object. They don't change the object. Setters mutate the object in some way. So these get things are accessors. Now set month. Let me go ahead and quickly copy some code that I've already pre-written here so that you don't have to waste time watching me type things in. You've already done the set month. Okay, you've already done the set month, and we'll call this month M right there. Okay, and then I've got some fancy code here for the day. The problem with setting the day is depending on the value of month, you need to worry about, hey, if it's February, is it a leap? You know, the only legal, the only values you can have are 28 or 29. Those are the only two values that are legal for February. How about if you said, how about the other months? So it's a little complicated. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the code here. Okay, let me just copy the code. It's coming right there. Copy that code. Copy it. Remove this code here. Paste it, and you're going to see, wow, what the heck is going on here? Okay, let me call this day D to get rid of those errors. And so the whole idea behind this code here is I'm saying, hey, depending upon the value of month, and month refers to the value that's inside the month field. Okay, if it's January, remember the home 30 days have September, April, June, and November. The rest have 31. Well, these months here have 31. So we need to check if the value of the D parameter is within proper range. Otherwise, we output a little message. That's bad. These months have 30 days in them. And then, let's not put that in this thing for now. You can see case 2 is February. Then if it's a leap year, and I'm going to put that code in there in a second so we get rid of this error. If it's a leap year, you go up to 29 days. Otherwise, if it's not a leap year, 28 days. And if you have any other value for D, it's just bad data. Okay, actually, that's not hard code for you to understand. You can go ahead and take a look at this code once you look at the source code. Let me grab the is leap year. Copy this code so that we have no more errors. And I'm going to put that code on the bottom here. Is leap year. And you remember what a leap year specification is. It's got to be a multiple of 4, and it's got to be a multiple of 4 and not a multiple of 100, or it's a multiple of 400. Just accept it for now. Accept it. So we've got the day. So that was a complicated function. And as far as the year is concerned, you could have negative years, I suppose, before Christ. But let's go. I'm just going to deal with positive years. see what I'm trying to locate my set. Where did it go? Set year right there. Yeah. Copy this. Copy this. And here's my set year code. Right there. It's got to be bigger than, we'll call this year Y instead of that. Okay, so Y is greater than or equal to 1. There was no year 0. It was year 1. It starts at year 1. Okay, so let's take a look at this. We've got some getters and setters. We come over here, and let's see. I suppose once we've got that function, we could say set day to be 12. Set the year. Set the year to be. Let me just show you what negative values, what the output of the system is going to be. Let's do the same thing here. I'm just going to copy this code, copy and paste. And I'm going to put negative 11, 12, 1967, I think. 1967 is what we had here. Instead of X's, we need to call them Y's. Okay. All right. Good. Run it. You can see. You see this red stuff? That's the standard error. See? So I know I did something bad. Oh, of course I did something bad. Negative 7. That should be positive 7. Okay. Run it again. Bad year specified, huh? Bad year. Of course that's a bad year. See, this is the nice thing about having those set functions look at the data and perform some kind of operation that tells you that something bad occurred. That's what the if statement. Okay, and then I think this is, you might as well get rid of that thing. Very bad month, 0. Okay, let's run this. Okay, once you got proper data, you're good to go. We outputted the data. I'm going to stop the video here. So part 1, what you're going to do is understand that functions need private data to prevent you from entering or just willy-nilly putting bad data into a field, and that you have to create getters and setters. Eclipse and IntelliJ and all these IDEs give you a nice way of creating these getters and setters. And then you have to go into the setters and basically check the data, the incoming data, to see if it's proper. If it's not, you're going to output error messages for your debugging purposes. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Take care.